All right, I'd like to call tonight's hearing to order.
So just a few housekeeping matters. One, there was at least one individual that wanted to claim party status. Are there any other individuals that did not claim party status last time that would like to or would seek to claim party status tonight? Mr. Joy, if you wanted to come up. Do you can we just swear him in quick?
I did. Is the microphone on? I think so. Can you hear me now? Okay. When I last was here, I claimed party status for myself. I inadvertently forgot to include my wife, Joanne, who also was at the same location. And she asked me to put her name in. I'm in trouble if I don't.
Okay, and what was your address again? I'm sorry.
62 Summerfield Drive.
And where is that in relation to the proposal?
It's on the corner of Farmstead and Summerfield.
Any objection? Obviously, no objection over here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's Joanne, Joy, Joy. Thank you.
I did receive, the other thing too, I did receive multiple letters from Attorney Spadoni, who I believe represents a group called the Concerned Citizens of Upper Mount Bethel or something like that. It was just a letter dated March 7th, 2024, a letter dated March 8th, 2024, and a letter dated March 11th, 2024, just renewing his request that Mr. Manzi recuse himself. So, and then there was a request, at least, and I'm not sure what exhibit we're on, but I guess it would be township exhibit would be
Township 1?
Township 1, I don't think you had anything else.
I had no exhibits at the
Okay,
time.
so Mr. Cousins, who represents the Board of Supervisors, is requesting that resolution number 2024-07 be entered as Exhibit Township 1.
It exists, okay, no sense fighting about it,
Okay.
without entering it.
Okay. Okay, and then I think we were with, do you have any housekeeping matters before we start?
Yeah, when I got the transcript, Fred and I realized we did not answer Mr. Rago's questions at the end, so if you don't mind, I'd like Fred to address. I think we misinterpreted what you were talking about.
And just one other thing so everybody understands, we are going to end at 10 o'clock tonight, so as we approach 10 o'clock, we'll kind of see where we're at, but we are going to be ending at 10 o'clock. I don't think anybody wants to be here till 11:30 like last time, so. Okay, sorry, Mark, go ahead.
So, I don't mean to interrupt you, Attorney Kaplan, but in addition to, if we're going to start talking about testimony, I did want to put something on the record regarding the resolution.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, Kim, I'll try and speak up a little bit. Is that better?
No, that would be.
Okay. So just a point of order on this, it's the supervisor's position that based upon the resolution that has been passed, and I'll discuss a little bit of the background of that and how it relates to the present application before this board, that this hearing should not continue at this time. After the last hearing that we had on the 27th of last month, there have been two resolutions that have been passed by the board. the first of which has now been rescinded, but the one that is now Exhibit Township 1 is 2024-07, and that's a resolution that was passed a week ago today at the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Supervisors. At that meeting, this resolution, which is directing the Upper Mount Bethel Municipal Authority to pay off its indebtedness, transfer its assets to the township, and dissolve itself, was passed unanimously by the Board of Supervisors. It is our position that this application, which relates directly to the municipal authority and its ability to take ownership of the proposed wastewater management treatment and the irrigation field which goes along with it, doesn't meet the standards for a special exception if there is new municipal authority. Now, I understand that this is a resolution that's been passed, no action has been taken since that time. Technically, the municipal authority still exists, but we're about to go into day 2 of this hearing. I know that the objectors have counsel, they have experts, and we're going to be going probably at least 2 more sessions, if not more, with the number of parties. The Township Board of Supervisors feels that moving forward with this application at this time, it is not warranted, given the fact that they believe that they have the right underneath the statute to not only to take the action they did last year by creating the authority, but also in the resolution, which is now to dissolve the authority. So that's the objection. I'll leave it at that. So I'm sure.
Do you want to respond, or?
Sure. At least for tonight, the authority's still in existence, but and is still capable of being the recipient of this special exception. What Mr. Cousins doesn't say, and what the resolution pointedly does not say, is that if the Board of Supervisors under the Municipal Authorities Act has the right to take over the assets and the projects of a municipal authority. But if they do, they take it over under and subject, and for the purpose of taking over that project. This authority, its articles of incorporation were passed that specifically say that it was formed for the purpose because there have been applications in the I-2 district. All of the township documents going back over 20 years in the sewer field say that there has to be a sewer treatment plant for the I-2 district. The board authorized the filing of this application so that it could take over part of the proposed development. So if they're successful in terminating this authority, which I don't believe they will, because we will contest it, then they end up they have to take it over under and subject to the program, the project that's in place. And they are a municipality, and therefore the special exception would apply to them.
To Mr. Cousins' point, assuming the authority today did not exist, I guess I'm trying to wrap my head around why the hearing wouldn't continue. I mean, if the authority didn't exist or there was no municipal entity, right, wouldn't that just be a basis to deny the special exception?
Possibly, but I think there's no standing to begin with, right? So
we have standing.
But they've started.
I understand. I understand.
I mean, as it stands today, the authority still does exist.
Correct.
Right. I mean, there's no disputing that.
It has not been dissolved as of today.
I mean, in my opinion, I think if that changes, or if this project is no longer linked to an authority, I think that would be the basis of the special exception being denied. I'm not sure it would allow us. I'm not aware of any authority that will allow us to just end the hearing. So, I mean, as it stands, as we sit here tonight, the authority, so, I mean, to your hypothetical, I think it's essentially moot for now while we move forward. I mean, the municipal authority still exists. So, okay.
Frankly, to the board, it seems to me it's in the interest of efficiency. It's not necessarily for you to take final action, excuse me, denying or accepting or agreeing to the special exception, but suspending the proceeding until this is made clearer, because it's very expensive on everyone's behalf to proceed through this event, and I'd rather see the cost to all parties reduced. It's simply in suspension until this matter is resolved. We were delayed a full year. You may recall that the original hearing, I think, was scheduled for March of 2023, and it was continuously suspended and presumably awaiting the creation of the authority, because the applicant didn't want to have the application proceed without the authority present. So if it's now, if its existence is in question, wouldn't it be prudent in terms of economic efficiency, frankly? And I don't think there's a large legal harm, because we're all prepared, but we wouldn't be spending the costs and expenses associated with proceeding when it may all be for naught.
But I don't think the board has the authority to suspend the hearing without consent from the applicant. I mean, I'm just saying, I think the Municipal Planning Act, I think clearly says there's a certain time frame from which, when the hearing starts, for us to, for it to continue and then for us to reach a decision. I think if we suspended it unilaterally, I think the applicant, it could be approved without there being a hearing, without there being a decision by the zoning hearing board. So I don't want to do that, and I will ask, Mr. Kaplan, is there any wish to consent to continue this matter?
No.
I mean, I don't think it's up to the board to make that decision to suspend it, so. Okay, anything else?
No, that's all I have, thank you.
Let me move this thing out far away. Oh, I'm sorry.
Good save. That's why he's the chair.
Thank you.
And just so we're clear, we're still with Mr. Ebert, right?
Yes. I think that's fine. I just couldn't see and I couldn't hear when Mr. Cousins spoke. May I? So, Fred, I believe it's Mr. Rago asked question at the end, almost at the end of your testimony, having to do with the location of the sewer treatment facility as depicted on the plans that we showed. And I believe his concern was that that plant will have mechanical operations, and I think his particular comment was that there'll be bearings that may go bad, and there will be a shrieking or a loud noise coming out as a result of that. So could you address that?
Yeah, absolutely. You hear me? Okay. There are actually no mechanical components, pumps or anything, down at the drip irrigation fields, on the Potomac West drip fields. The only thing that's down there will be a controller that will receive either a cellular or radio signal, and then underground electrically actuated solenoid valves. So all the pumps and everything will be located over on the RPL property at the wastewater treatment plant. It will pump the treated effluent over, and then it will pressurize a valve or pressurize a main, and then we will open and close all the different zone valves. So there will be no noise, there will be no mechanically, no pumps, no control building. It'll simply be a small controller. And by small, I mean it'll be 3 feet by 3 feet, you know, and all it will be is basically a PLC in there that will receive a cellular signal that will say, all right, dose zones 1, 3, and 6 for 8 minutes. At the end of 8 minutes, it will close those solenoid valves, open other solenoid valves. All the solenoid valves are actually located in underground vaults, approximately 3 feet below grade, with actually a insulated cover over them, basically to prevent freezing of the valves. So there will be no noise that will be generated or no other mechanical equipment that will be out there located on the disposal field.
Okay, can I ask a question?
I think Mr. Agu was talking about the location of the treatment plant.
And that is not on the Potomac West Fields, that's over on RPL's property.
The treatment plant?
Yes.
Okay, in fact, I've got the site plan in front of me, and I'm sorry, and I'm looking at these beautiful pictures here.
Yep.
Where is the plan scheduled to go in relation to the area that we're talking about?
Let us get, well, there's a plan.
Is this what we're talking about, this one?
Yeah, can we just
Let me make sure.
I've got the one with all the lift stations on it.
Can we just identify which
and the
exhibit
fields
we're
are
referring
not-
to? Can we just identify which exhibit we're referring to so that the
Yeah,
record's
that's
clear?
what I'm gonna try and find out right now. 6. Yeah, I think it is A6. I don't think, Mr. Ragland, it is the one that you're holding. Those to me are like 10, 11, and 12.
Okay, I'm looking at this one that has the individual lift stations on it. Okay, so, which you don't show on there. that I can see. Okay, I can work off of that, if, whatever Fred can show me on.
It is 6.
I can work off of that one too.
Dynamic engineering.
What does he have? It might be better.
Yes. This is in the box, this is what I'm looking for, the lift stations here, and I'm looking for the
Plant's right here,
okay,
the drip fields are over here.
right, now I understand. So this is the
You gotta put this on the record. And you can't, Fred, you can't say here and point.
No, I will.
Here's, SK1. Yeah, and there it is on the board, A6. Thanks.
The wastewater treatment plant is located on the southern side of the RPL property, with that driveway coming off of Potomac Street, comes back into a circular driveway where the current Saddle Club is today. It basically, where the Saddle Club riding rink is almost exactly where the wastewater treatment plant will be located. So it is. You sent me the link. Approximately 900 to 1,000 feet northeast of Potomac Street on the southernmost portion of the RPL property.
So just to clarify, so slightly to the southwest of Building 9 that's identified on A6?
Yes. And there's a circular driveway that goes around the wastewater treatment plant, which also contains the control building, and then the effluent storage, and the pumps that will convey it to the Potomac West drip fields.
Okay, Fred, question, what's the size of the force main that's going in there?
From raw water, or that will convey it to the effluent?
The conveyance of the effluent into the actual plant.
Raw wastewater comes into the plant, treated effluent leaves the plant, goes to disposal.
So both, what's the size of the force main coming in? Approximately 6 inch, 4 inch?
6 inch. It's
6 inch?
definitely 6 inch. It could be 8 inch, only because of the friction losses that come from the side, from where the pump station is located up there. So it would be 6 or 8 inch.
Is it ductile?
Yes, ductile iron. It would be class 52, epoxy line ductile iron pipe.
Okay, and what's coming out? To the conveyance
Coming
fee.
out will be a 6-inch force main.
Okay,
And the reason for that is, I have to handle peak instantaneous flow coming into the treatment plant. So the rates coming in will be higher. We will equalize the flow, not only in the influent equalization tanks, but also in the 3-day storage tank. So I can distribute, flows will come in, I assume, over a 12 to 18-hour period with certain peaks, lunch, shift change,
Right.
things like that. But we will uniformly distribute it over approximately 22 hours to the drip field at a constant rate over 22 hours. The extra 2 hours are basically to allow me to have some maintenance and downtime.
okay. Now, we're assuming that we're gonna be using all of these lift stations, and we're making the assumption that this place will actually be full of customers, clients, renters. Have you designed the actual lift stations themselves yet, the pits and everything? In terms of what's gonna be in there? In other words, we've got, I'm sorry, go ahead, you talk.
The answer is no.
Okay.
They will actually be designed when the actual tenants, so you talk about the lift stations.
The individual ones.
The individual ones, so they will be, a prototype will be designed, that will basically be a placeholder. That will have 2 pumps and a monitoring station. Once the actual tenant's known, and they complete the municipal industrial pretreatment application, we will then select the technology that will be put in the monitoring manhole, depending on what type of process they have, or it could just be domestic, there will be nothing, or it could be like a data center. So we could have a data center with just domestic people and cooling water. And then the actual pumps will actually be selected based on their projected peak flow. The reason for that is they could have even though their average daily flow is 6,000 gallons, they could have a batch discharge from non-contact fluid condenser. Something like that could come out at 100 gallons a minute. Well, obviously, it's coming in 100, it's got to leave at 100. So that's why we don't do the final pick, because there could be a excessive batch that comes from them.
Right, so
What
that
I
heat
also do is, instead of it,
Fred,
right
let
now-
him ask his
No,
question.
no,
Oh, I'm
No,
sorry.
let him finish, he's answering my question, it's
Yeah,
okay.
so right now I have it set up, theoretically as a 5-foot diameter wet well that would house 2 pumps. If it's got a large batch, but it's a very short duration,
Okay,
we may have a significantly bigger wet well that would be like 8 or 10-foot diameter, so that it can handle, equalize that volume and pump it out at a controlled rate. So sometimes flow in equals flow out. If it's a very short duration, then I will oversize my holding structure that contains the pumps and pump it out at a more uniform rate, so I'm not stressing or making everything else bigger to get downstream.
okay. One last question. This is an incredible system. You are going to design redundancy into each and every station, I assume.
Absolutely.
Okay.
There will definitely be
Pedestals,
2 pumps. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, pedestals or submersibles?
Submersibles.
Okay. You design redundancy into, I'll be done in 1 second.
No, go ahead.
You design a beautiful redundant system. Who gets to, how do we know that that same system is going to be put in? In other words, you design a beautiful redundant system, and all of a sudden, we get 1 pump from Kmart.
Well, initially.
This is not on your end, you're the designer. What I'm asking is, who gives the final approval for what
Can I
goes
answer
in?
that?
Yes.
Can I answer that? There's a very comprehensive draft of an agreement between my client and the authority that was reviewed twice by the township solicitor, and we incorporated his comments. The design of the system will be inspected by the authorities, will be reviewed by the authorities inspector, and there will be construction, there will be an inspector during construction to make sure that what we've said in those plans gets
Okay, so we've already said what we're putting in.
And to answer your question more fully, is part of that agreement that he's talking about requires that I approve the shop drawings and the authority engineer approve the shop drawings. So
Okay,
there's no way for them to get a building permit, they need to have the use and occupancy permit. They can only install it based on my approved shop drawing. I'm not gonna change my standards because they wanna save $2.
no, I know you're not going.
Yeah, and so I have to say, so they can only do that. Then on top of mine, the authority can have even more criteria beyond my minimum standards. And they can only construct what's approved in the shop drawings by my firm and the authority's engineer's firm. And then it's inspected by the authority, and ultimately probably the township building code official will come out and bless it prior to issuing a use and occupancy permit. After I leave, and this is 10 years down the road, and a tenant changes, or something like that, the authority engineer will have to approve a replacement, because these pumps can change, because their process can change. So they came in today building widgets, now they're building something else. Every time they do that, the municipal industrial pre-treatment program requires them to go back in, amend their permit, get a new permit, and make any modifications to the system. So by having that, and that permit has to be renewed every 3 years, every time there's a change. I'm involved in one in Montgomery County right now, where I literally have a client that I don't think they've gone 4 months without modifying their MIP permit, because things change. There's research and development, always changing, and they always update it. The good thing about it is the MIP not only protects the township and the authority, but it also protects the industry. So the industry is most likely the most proactive, because they want to say, hey, I disposed everything, I discharged it in accordance with my permit, I have no liability. So that's why they're so good, and that's why MIP programs are so effective, is they protect both sides by being honest.
Just to follow up that one, just on that topic, because the discussion was about the authority's engineer. Let's assume that the authority does not exist, and the town, let's just say, Mr. Kaplan had indicated that if there was some sort of agreement between the authority and the applicant, would that apply to the township? Would the township's engineer have to review all that stuff?
We expect to have finalized that agreement, and if they do get to take over, they take over subject to that agreement as I read the law.
So the township would have to approve it as well?
Yeah, now, there's,
Or the township's engineer?
He would do the same, he would just replace the word, everything I said that had the word authority would be replaced with the word township. If for some reason the township wouldn't, it'd be a third-party PUC engineer.
but that's what I wanted to get to. I don't know what is in the heads of the current board, but if the current board were to somehow opt not to be in this at all, we're going to Aqua. We're going to,
Just to clarify, what's Aqua?
well, they're Aqua Pennsylvania or Pennsylvania American. They are PUC regulated, wastewater, huge companies. And they fit under the definition for the special exception.
So you mean a private company that's regulated by the PUC, a private sewer water company?
That's right. And that's mentioned in the same provision that allows the authority or the municipality to obtain the special exception.
Exactly. Anything under the regulations of the PUC would be a public utility provider. The same as PICO, PPNL, other people that are applied to that.
If I may, that's not what's in the documentation to use it, though, correct?
That is correct.
Your application and the documentation that was part of the submissions that we received last, is only anticipating that the authority is involved.
That is correct.
Go back.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Yeah, I have a quick question here. I was looking at the original application that was filed in December of '22, and it asked for relief from the 500-foot setback in the industrial zone. Why does that have a 500-foot setback? Is there a
Doesn't.
particular reason?
It's that, the zoning officer, when we went to her originally, said that, yes, you need a special exception, and oh, by the way, the 500-foot setback applies. There's a subsequent letter, it's in the documents, where that was changed. So we have withdrawn that challenge to,
Ordinance 2020-02 does mention a 500-foot distance.
does.
And the other part that I was curious about is, I joined the board 6 years ago, and at 6 years ago, I was given a copy of the zoning ordinances. There's no mention of 500-foot. So it looks like it came in with the ordinance 2020-02. So I was wondering, what's the rationale for 500 feet? Did someone, is that a recognized metric? Is that a state standard? Is that something? I was just curious to see why 500 the number even exists.
I drafted that.
Yeah,
I thought that I used the ordinance. I can't tell you. I don't have an answer for that. I just know that that 500-foot setback does not apply in this case.
It applies in the I-2 zone. And that's what my determination originally said. Anything in the I-2 would require the 500-foot setback, not
And we
in the
meet
R1.
that. And we meet that, as Fred demonstrated a couple minutes ago.
okay, and then last question. What is the distance for this drip irrigation field? What's the closest it is to another house?
Well, I will tell you what the DEP regulations require.
I saw that, I know.
It's 25 feet.
No, okay, what you've mapped here to existing houses, how
This
far?
proposed plan that you have is what he's asking.
I have to measure it, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I don't remember
It's certainly
that.
less than 500 feet, right?
Yes, I
Okay.
think it's less than 500 feet, yes.
Thank you.
I would say it's around 350 feet, if my memory serves me correctly.
Just
But
curious.
wait a minute, gentlemen.
Yeah.
What is the it that you two are talking about? You're saying that something is 500 feet.
Well,
Are you
the-
talking about the pipes underground, or are you talking about
The disposal field,
just the field itself?
yes. And I imagine because of where you're putting the plant, that would be farther than 500 feet from a residence.
Absolutely, it's probably
Yeah.
over 1,000.
No, I'm very familiar with that land.
Yeah, and the DEP only requires from a treatment plant to an
Right.
existing occupied dwelling, 250 feet is a recommendation, but not a requirement.
Right, and so for the disposal field, you're saying ballpark
The
3 something?
DEP
maybe?
requirement is 25 feet, and I have many of them within, they're actually 50 feet because it's 25 feet to my property line and then 25 feet side yard setback, but I have many of them that close.
Thank you.
But I don't
Gentlemen-
think you answered the question. You're not able to measure that today with the drawings that we have here.
I think you said at least approximately 350 feet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's approximately 350 feet. I have to measure it, but yeah.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, one more quick question for the attorneys, for my clarification. The authority that we're talking about is the authority that presumably will be defunct soon? When we say the authority, is that who we're talking about?
It could be that authority, yeah, the authority that exists as of today, yes.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. I didn't know who the authority was.
Yeah.
Cross-examine.
Hidden behind the board. Maybe I'll come up and give it a try from there. Oh. Yeah. It's easier for you to sit there. I think that would be better. I can see, Mr. Ebert, let me first say, my voice does not indicate illness as far as I know, so I don't have any
Can't use that as an excuse.
Hear me now? Hello? Hello? All right. I'm going to try on, got a long list of questions. Some of them have been answered, so I've got to kind of jump around, so I'll try to be efficient here. But the first thing I'd like you to do, Mr. Ebert, is tell us, I'm now referring to the appellant's application. It's called the Appellant's Exhibit Book, which was given to each of us in the beginning. So if you could tell us which of those exhibits, for which of them are you responsible for generating or creating?
A7, A8, A9, A10 was done in concert with VW Consultants. A11 was done in concert with Valley Environmental. A12, A15, A22,
Oh, wait a minute. Hold on one moment. Where is the exhibit list?
I don't have an 822.
this is A22.
That was the emitter, okay.
A23,
Okay. Now, I think we looked earlier at A6. Could you just, which is the large drawing that we've all been referring to, and on it is the name of Dynamic Engineering. Are you related to them in any way? And how did that drawing come about, to the extent you know?
yes. Dynamic Engineering is the land development engineer for the River Point Logistic Development. I worked with them in creating the sanitary sewer conveyance to the location of the pump stations, the location of the wastewater treatment plant, which is shown on there, the location of the water storage tank, the location of the water mains and water distribution system, the monitoring wells, the monitoring stations at every building, the individual grinder pump stations at every building, as well as sitting in alignment meetings with them. So I've worked very closely with them, but the land development plans were created by Dynamic Engineering, not Ebert Engineering.
All right, we'll come back to some of those in a moment then. Could you tell us who retained VW Consultants, LLC, and Valley Environmental Services?
It was my recommendation, but they are actually retained and paid for by, I believe it's Ashley Development or RPL, whatever entity is there. So they are actually retained by the developer, based on my recommendation and having worked closely with them over the last almost 3 decades.
Okay. Who provided them direction or instructions regarding what they would study and investigate?
I would say it was a collaborative effort, quite honestly, and it's an iterative process. So like soils mapping is done by VW Consultants. Then I do a drip layout and do an approximate yield. And then it goes to Valley Environmental to do a detailed hydrogeologic mounding analysis and hydrogeologic study of the property. So it's an iterative process, and a property may be a potential disposal field may be included or excluded at any point during that overall process.
Did that occur at any time during this iterative process, that you started with one target, I'll call it a target area, and that then was rejected through this process?
Many times.
Well, we may come, I'd like to probably come back to that when we get a little further along and tell us how that worked, okay? I think you've discussed the coordination then through them. You had a June 15th, 2023 PowerPoint that I think you showed. Maybe, was that shown at the first hearing? That,
I don't recall the PowerPoint.
that PowerPoint included some pictures of various fields you had constructed. And that PowerPoint said you had constructed these similar sequential batch facilities in Upper Euclid.
I'm going to object. What PowerPoint, what exhibit are you talking about?
I didn't prepare a PowerPoint.
I believe you testify.
Hang on.
Yeah.
I think Mr. Ebert, if you just want to answer that question?
Yeah, I did not prepare a PowerPoint presentation for this hearing, nor did I review one during my testimony.
Okay. You talked about residential developments that contain sequential batch treatment facilities, and I thought you referenced them as being in Upper Euclid Township, and maybe they were either the Applecross development, the Wallace development, or the estates at Dowland Forge. Do you remember talking about any of those during your direct testimony?
Yes, and they're not all, there is, the Upper Euclid is the Route 100 Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, and that is in Upper Euclid Township. The Applecross is in East Brandywine Township, Chester County. The Wallace Regional is in Wallace Township, Chester County. The Pennsville Wastewater Treatment Plant is in Lehigh Township, Lehigh County. What other ones did I mention?
I'd have to go look at the transcript.
I probably mentioned the Country Crossing, that is in Warwick Township, Bucks County. If you have any other ones, I can tell you the township that they're in. They're not all in Upper Euclid.
Oh, no, I didn't mean to imply that, I'm sorry. The core of my question was that I thought all those that you had referred to were simply and exclusively residential developments and did not have any industrial component associated with them. Is that true or not?
That is not true. Simply the Country Crossing Wastewater Treatment Plant in Warwick Township, Bucks County, services the Country Crossing Industrial Park as well as a residential development. But it has a approximately 36 lot, 200 acre industrial park that it services. The Fish Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant is a Jet Tech SBR that has at least five industrial parks that it services there.
And were all of these the same, what I'll call separation models, where the industrial, presumably the residential components have what would be standard sanitary or domestic sewage or wastewater components, and then the industrial components would have to be separate, or were they merged into the single batch reactor system?
Oh, they're all merged. They all connect at different locations throughout the conveyance system. In all those cases, you know, the industrial parks, like all industrial parks, only can discharge biologically treatable wastewater, but it's all merged, it all comes down, all treated in the same mixed-use batch. So 30 houses combined with 30 industrial park, with 30 industrial lots, flow down through 500 more houses, flow down through 3 more industrial parks, and all end up at the treatment plant at the same time.
Well, how then did you prevent industrial waste from getting into that treatment plant?
It's the same way I'm proposing here, a municipal industrial pretreatment program. You know, it's not a SBR, but I represent Conshohocken Borough Authority. Conshohocken Borough at one time had a lot of industry, and we have regulated that through, very successfully, through a municipal industrial pretreatment that only allows for biologically treated wastewater to be discharged to the treatment plant. All the other wastewater has to be hauled away with a manifest provided
in accordance with their issued permit.
I'm fairly familiar with industrial pretreatment programs, which were intended or are intended to make any waste that does or would then flow to a municipal wastewater system, treatment system compatible with it and not in any way interfere with it. Is that your understanding of what a pretreatment program is intended to do?
Well, the tree treatment program basically establishes the criteria of what's allowed to be discharged and at what concentration. It can be implemented through many different ways. You know, it could be, they could pre-treat it down to a level that would be acceptable, or they could haul it away. So a pre-treatment program really monitors and regulates what's allowed to be discharged from the site and what must be hauled away.
Okay. And so you're proposing a similar logic, I take it, for this development, so that Industry A could presumably send what I'll call sanitary waste, maybe cafeteria type waste, washroom waste, to this SBR. But if it had any other industrial waste, or maybe even heavy cleansing materials, they might have to be segregated and then wouldn't be allowed into the system at all, in theory? Is that the idea?
Yes. Yeah, no, that's exactly it. You know, unless there was a approved pretreatment system, absolutely, that is the intent of it. And to be able to monitor it and maintain compliance so that there's nothing that would impact the biological treatment system.
And that's the purpose of this forced, I've forgotten what you called the little interval stations, but these, you would have to pump up into the main drain and have the ability to monitor and measure it at these pumping stations, whether anything inconsistent with the sanitary treatment goals would be passing towards that treatment plan. Is that correct?
Yes, so what it actually will do is it will flow from the building through a monitoring station, which will have some kind of equipment. The equipment will be selected based on the tenant. If something is detected by the monitoring equipment, it will actually shut down that pump station. So it can't be discharged into the system. It will actually shut it down there. There will also be monitoring equipment down at what I'm going to call, for lack of a better term, regional pump station that will monitor it there and could shut it down. There will also be monitoring equipment at the influent equalization tank to the treatment plant. The goal is, if something happens and is discharged, that A, we can stop it before it impacts the biological treatment process. It can be retained and hauled away to an appropriate facility. And that's also, excuse me, let me finish. That's also why we don't allow any floor drains, so that we're minimizing the chance of any accidental discharge into the system. You know, that's why that is another key component of not allowing any floor drains in there.
Mm-hmm. Now, at your, I'm not now talking the disposal field, I'm talking at the treatment plant, or it could be presumably located at or near the disposal field. Is there any retention facility conceptually at the treatment plant so that if something did get through this process that fouled the sequential batch reactor, you could hold a considerable flow essentially from the whole community until that was addressed or taken away?
Yes, we actually have a minimum, we have a 600,000 gallon effluent storage tank. So if something were to impact the biology of the system, it would not be allowed to be discharged to the disposal fields. It would be retained within that 600,000 gallon storage facility, which at today's flows is approximately 6 days of storage. That would allow for tanker trucks, 6,000 gallon trucks, to haul that treated effluent that had impacted the biological treatment system down to, I'm going to say, DuPont or another acceptable facility depending upon what was in the wastewater that impacted the biology. And that would continue to happen until we would actually bypass the treatment system. We would pump directly, the raw wastewater would pump directly from the influent equalization tank to that 600,000 gallon storage tank. I would reseed the biological treatment plant from another municipality and restart the treatment process, and would not allow it to discharge until it was within the discharge criteria.
Of the systems you earlier discussed today, some went to what I'll call large municipal sewage treatment plants. If it's Conshohocken, I think you mentioned,
Yes.
was one. And I think there was another, one or another, that were also public wastewater treatment plants. Between any of the private ones or public ones, were there failures? I'm just wondering whether the ones you're familiar with, have they had failures in their effluent?
They were all the ones that I referenced are municipally owned, either by a township or an authority. So all the plants that I designed, with the exception of one, which I did not mention, for a small shopping center, have all been municipally owned. That's almost a requirement today in Pennsylvania. Or when I say municipally owned, they could be owned by Aqua Pennsylvania or some other regulated PUC. There have been no failures where we needed to reseed the treatment plant. Have there been, some of them are stream discharge, and have there been excursions normally caused by inflow and infiltration? Yes, but there have been none that have been killed to the point where they needed to be reseeded and started from scratch, to my knowledge, with the exception of a flood.
I'm sorry?
With the exception of a flooding event.
So when you said inflow and infiltration, you mean excess flow is overloaded?
Excess flow that came in and caused a loss of detention time, and we lost our inability to treat to the level of the discharge standard. So that's an exception to the NPDES permit, which is allowed, quite honestly. But no, I'm not aware of anyone where we had someone dump on us that killed the wastewater treatment plant. And in my entire career, I've not had it where I had to reseed a treatment plant because of an illegal dump on us.
Do you consider all of these treatment plants to have been sequential batch reactors, or are some of them the more traditional type treatment plants?
All the ones with the exception of Conshohocken were sequential batch reactors. Conshohocken is actually a rotating biological contactor. That's a different process. But all the ones that I've referenced are only sequential batch reactor process treatment plants. I did not testify on any of my other plants that used another treatment process.
Can you tell us what the difference is between what I'll call a biologically treatable organic and refractory organics?
I don't understand the term refractory organics, but I will tell you that biologically...
Wait, if you don't understand the question, don't attempt to answer.
Okay.
What would be a biologically treatable organic, if that phrase you recognize then?
It's one that we can treat through the use of adding oxygen and removing oxygen. That we can have the biology, which are bugs that are produced by our body or another living organism, that will then eat. So all we do at a treatment plant is we enhance what Mother Nature does in a stream. So we add air the same way Mother Nature does in a riffle. We will then, to remove nitrogen, we will take the air away. And so in the first step, we'll convert ammonia to nitrate and nitrates. I remove the air away. The bugs are starving for oxygen. They will grab that oxygen molecule, and as a result of grabbing that oxygen molecule, nitrogen is given off as a gas to the atmosphere. There is, what fuels that is a carbon source, which we characterize as biological oxygen demand or carbonaceous biological oxygen demand. Phosphorus is removed through production of sludge. Basically, the bugs eat them, and then they're taken away as part of a waste product. So it's something that I can treat through the ability of turning air on and off, is a simple definition of it.
Now, I'm gonna ask the question again, and I expect it'll be objected to, so you just wait. Don't try to answer until Mark corrects. But I just wanna, so if you're not familiar with the term refractory organics, would it be possible for you to tell me whether you know whether they pass through a normal biologic system or not?
My objection is he's already said he doesn't know what they are.
And if you don't, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't, I'm not familiar with
Okay.
that term.
When dealing with food, I'm sorry, I thought you had your hand up. When dealing with food processing waste, how would you determine the types or concentration of food waste that could be allowed? How would that,
They would basically, on food waste, depending on the type, it's a very high biological oxygen demand. So we would establish a maximum concentration or a maximum pounds per day. So people, when you design a treatment plant, you design it not only on concentration, but you design it really on pounds per day. So you could have a very high concentration that is in a lower volume. It's basically how long does the treatment plant have to oxidize or treat that, so it's detention time. So it's how long we can treat it. So we would limit them so that the total influent load to the treatment plant was within its design parameters. So when treatment plant capacity is allocated, it's not just allocated on a flow. It's actually allocated on a pounds per day of a treatment capacity. That is normally pounds per day of biological oxygen demand, of ammonia, of total nitrogen, of total phosphorus, and that's basically because we have to keep a certain ratio, so we can only allocate so many pounds to someone, and they here they don't pay for it, but it's assigned to them or allocated to them in a pounds per day as well as a flow. So there's times where I have treatment plants that are organically limited, so my flow may only be half of its rated flow capacity, but I'm at my organic loading in pounds per day limit. Therefore, I have to either expand the plant and can't allow any additional loadings until then.
okay? Given that the site of the proposed drip irrigation system has been an agricultural field for many years, what are the contaminants in the soil, or the likely or possible contaminants in the soil and groundwater from that use, if you know?
I don't know.
Okay. If there were contaminants there, would not a new drip irrigation field that's putting substantially additional flow into the site move those contaminants into either laterally or horizontally?
It would have the same exact impact as a heavy rainstorm. It would have no different impact. Water moves through soil the way water moves through soil, and I'm applying it in the top horizon of the soil. So I would have no more impact than than any rain event would have. So it would not change the direction or any other or anything. It's going to go where it's going to go, whether we have treated effluent or not. The only thing that may change is the pace in which it goes.
I was going to ask you that. Would not this drip irrigation field essentially be a new heavy rainstorm each and every day?
It would be a consistent factor because we dose it at the same exact amount every day. It all depends on the how much of it is absorbed by the grass crop that we have. So it definitely, I would say that it has a net increase, but it may not have the impact of a heavy rainstorm because we'll have a heavy grass crop on it all year, whereas a crop field won't. Like if it's a cornfield or a soybean field, that will directly go in and and have more of an impact than it would with a grass or hay crop on top of it.
Okay. Can you tell us, did you select the Angle property as a target location for the drip irrigation field?
I would say no. It was originally, I think it was originally identified as a property that could be obtained by the developer. It was, then the soils were looked at on USGS maps by VW consultants, and then they confirmed the soils mapping with preliminary test pits out there, and that's when I became involved. After the preliminary test pits confirmed the soil classification,
Okay. Were you still trying to answer, or you?
No, I was
completed?
done.
Okay. Can you tell us whether the water sampling that was conducted included looking for semi-volatiles, any polyaromatic hydrocarbons, base neutrals, pesticides or herbicides, or heavy metals?
I did not do the water sampling. There'll be another expert tonight that will answer the
And
results.
who would that expert be?
Jeff Clark.
He was the geologist, as I
He is a
recall.
professional, yes.
And I thought I saw a lot of the water sampling data in Mr. Valentine's report. So who would one or both of them, to your knowledge, be involved in doing the water testing?
The water testing, I mean, to the extent that it's there for it being the detailed hydrogeologic report, which is all contained in my planning module. So it gets, combined into one package by my firm. But those test results were done by a third-party lab. So they will pump it to waste and do the sampling in accordance with DEP requirements.
All right, so that question I just asked about why were some things not tested for, I should address to either or both of those gentlemen after they testify, presumably.
Yes, and I believe it's prescribed by the PADEP as a requirement for a drip irrigation field.
Okay. Do you know, and again, if you think it's the other gentleman when they testify, I'll certainly defer it, but if you know, in and around the proposed drip irrigation field, I think you said there was going to be monitoring equipment as well, but maybe I've misunderstood that. So the question would be, you have this, will you monitor the consequences of the drip irrigation field performing its functions? Will there be surrounding monitors looking either at water table elevations or content of that water?
The answer is yes. It's monitored both upstream and downstream so that we know if anything is flowing onto the site and at what concentration, and we know what is leaving. And that is done quarterly by, I'll say, the authority will come in and have a third-party lab that will monitor that quarterly. It's then reported to the DEP annually on the 28th day after the anniversary of the permit issuance. So if it was, on January 2nd, the report due is January 30th. And then every 5 years, a more detailed annual report must be submitted to the DEP. That must be signed and sealed by a professional hydrogeologist and not an engineer.
Doug, the hydrogeologist will tell you about the monitoring wells that have been installed.
Good. Okay, thank you. I think you've already spoken to this, but maybe still we'll do it just one more time because you made a particular point of it. You said you thought, you were confident, I thought, your proposed system will actually reduce nitrate concentrations from what they are now, and presumably what they are flowing to neighboring well systems or water systems. Could you tell us how that would work and why?
Okay, how that works is really because right now it's an agricultural production. So the farmer is putting on fertilizer, which is nitrogen, and we are putting on effluent that is less than 10 milligrams per liter. So as a result, there will be not only dilution by us putting less total pounds of nitrogen on the field per year, compared to agricultural practices, but that they will actually be diluted by our flows.
The monitoring you intend to do at the facilities, would that catch whether heavy metals and other toxic chemicals were entering the system?
You would most likely catch that in your sludge analysis. So if there were any heavy metals that were sent to the treatment plant, you would actually catch that in a sludge analysis. You wouldn't catch that as a soluble going out. So you would know if someone were doing something through the analysis of the sludge that is taken away and removed.
Whose sludge?
The biological waste, the sludge from the treatment plant.
In other words, the first time you would catch that heavy metal would be by testing the sludge of this, sequential batch reactors sludge.
Yes. That's how anyone will catch any heavy metal. From a
So you wouldn't catch it at the factory itself. This pump system and testing port system wouldn't catch that, for example.
Heavy metal, most likely not. You would catch that. You have to do a detailed sample. There's no real monitoring equipment for heavy metals. That actually has to be done through a lab sample. So you would catch it through the sampling of their raw wastewater coming out of their facility. You could catch it at that monitoring station, but the treatment plant, you would not catch it normally as a result of an influence sample analysis. It actually has to be tied up in a sludge, really, to catch a heavy metal, and that's really where you would catch it.
Would some of those heavy metals then potentially flow to the drip irrigation field before you catch it in the sludge?
I can't say it's impossible, but most heavy metals are tied up in a sludge because they're heavy, they're metal, so they get absorbed and they fall out, and they, and they're caught by the treatment plant. So it's very rare that it will go out in the treated effluent because that floats to the top, and a heavy metal, almost by definition, will sink to the bottom and be wasted out. So I can't preclude something, but I can say that theoretically it should never happen.
Okay. What other toxics are you familiar with that might first be captured or noticed in the sludge of the SBR?
If it's a toxic, I will notice it because it will impact my biological treatment system. So just like your body gets sick, it's a biology. So if I give you a toxic, the first thing I'm going to notice is you're not acting right. So how does a treatment plant do it? It foams. Or
it does what? Sorry?
An example is it would foam if it had a toxic. When it gets upset, a lot of times it foams. You would actually see masses of the sludge would actually float to the top because it's dying. So when you die, your bones are lighter than your body, they float to the top. So you would notice the particle size of the when it's mixing, the actual particle size, which is normally very granular looking, like the size of a rice, for lack of a better thing, you would notice that it's now the size of a dime or size of a lima bean. Like there's things like that you would notice. Like I said, foaming. There's many things that the same way, an operator knows that the same way you know your kids. You know how when your kid's just not acting right? That's how an operator is with his treatment plant. He knows when it's just not right. Like I don't even know how to describe it. It's the art portion of it. Like, wow, he's sluggish today. You notice things like that. And that's when you immediately do a lot more testing to identify the source of what caused it. Is it a temperature change? Was there a mechanical issue? Or was something discharged in that's upsetting the biological treatment process? So you know very, very quickly. And just the way you get sick, it happens almost the way you get sick. Like you're feeling good one day and you're not the next.
And assuming what are the visual eyes on this process and how quickly would that be noticed? And then once you notice it, what would you do?
Well, the visual eyes are, this is required to be operated by a licensed operator from the DEP. So that the person that's out there operating actually has to be licensed. They're required to be there 7 days a week.
Well, they are.
Yes, so they're 7 days a week. They are taking, there's certain samples that they take, and I don't know what the permit is here, but like, flow is taken daily, dissolved oxygen is normally taken daily, pH is taken, there's certain test parameters that are taken daily every day and recorded in the logbook.
And they're not there 24/7 though, I take it.
No, and there's nothing that happens to biology that it takes hours, not days, but it takes hours. So it's not something, almost nothing is immediately toxic. Exception would be somebody dumping diesel fuel down or something like that. That can be toxic rather quickly. But for the most part, it's in there, and that's how every municipal treatment plant in Pennsylvania is operated.
But if the impact were to show in the, let's see, 24, in the 17, well, I guess 16 hours, that they're not there, is there anything in the system that shuts it down, or you just have to wait till the person gets there the next morning to say, oh, something's really wrong?
Well, it should trigger one of the monitoring stations at the individual company. It should trigger the monitoring station at the regional pump station. It should trigger the monitoring station at the influent equalization tank. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter, because I'm going to store it for at least a day before I discharge it.
Oh, in all cases?
In all cases, I'm going to catch it. So if it takes 24 hours, I know before I send it out to the drip field.
Oh, so the effluent from the SBR goes to your storage system all the time?
All the time.
And
every single day.
leaves the storage system?
That's correct.
Okay. Did you check any other sites, or you or your colleagues in this process, for suitability for a drip irrigation field beyond, I think it's the Potomac property and the Angle property?
Objection. We're here about a particular site that is the subject of this special exception. We're not here for some challenge to where we've decided to put the system.
Okay.
I mean, from my recollection, I believe there was some extensive testimony about why this particular site was chosen, I guess soils and things like that, the type of soil.
Well, we said that, yes, we did, we said that. But whether or not we looked at other sites may be a subject for inquiry in someplace else, but we're here only about a special exception for this 89 or 22 acres. It's irrelevant whether we looked at anything else or not.
Well, I'm curious what you believe the condition of the soils and the bedrock and clay layers would be in this site. It seems to me, and we'll have witnesses of our own at a later time, but I've heard that this site has relatively thin soils in a lot of areas, has a clay layer. It doesn't seem to me to be the best possible site for this.
You're talking about this specific site?
This specific site.
Objection. Are you testifying now?
Well, I'm asking him if what I'm saying has any resonance to him in terms of the investigations he's conducted.
I can answer that very clearly.
Yeah,
These are
great.
deep, well-drained soils, or deep, mildly well-drained soils. That would definitely not be the case on the areas that we're using. We're not talking about the entire property, because we're only using 22 acres out of the 90. The areas that we have are either deep, well-drained, or moderately deep, well-drained. So they are very significant soils.
Good. Okay, let's see, I'm nearly done. So again, if I have questions about the aquifer characteristics, the depth of groundwater, that would all come from the other witnesses after they've testified, because they'll be talking about the monitoring programs that they've already established. 'Cause I understand test pits have been conducted, and monitoring wells. So would you be the one to speak about that, or the
No,
others?
they would be.
Okay. Has this proposed system been included in any PADEP-approved sewage facilities plan update, to your knowledge?
Well, it was clearly discussed in the draft Act 537 plan that was not approved by the DEP. I have a currently pending sewage facilities planning module that's going through the approval process. The soils that are contained in here were witnessed by the PADEP. As part of this, the DEP has approved our groundwater monitoring plan. So we don't have a final approval. We are in the approval process. And this exact alternative was discussed and evaluated in the township's draft Act 537 plan. And was conceptually discussed back in the 1990 plan. It has always been a need for this, for a treatment plant to service this zoning district, and land application via drip irrigation was one of the alternatives to be considered.
Okay. One of the members of the board, I think, addressed the issue of the separation distance or isolation distance, whatever we wish to call it, from homes. Do you have a view on what would be appropriate to protect neighboring homes from any ill consequences of the drip irrigation process?
The DEP requirement, I'll just tell you what the regulatory requirement is. The regulatory requirement is 25 feet.
Okay.
From a property line, and we have many, many installations that are 25 feet from a property line.
Can I just, you're talking about the drip irrigation area or drip irrigation facility is 25 feet away from
The
something.
wetted area to a property line.
Okay.
Just to clarify on that point, you're talking, that's the DEP standard, that's not what's being proposed here.
That's absolutely correct. I have to measure it again, but I believe that we're at least 350 feet, but the plans clearly show my wetted area, and you can measure that over there. I haven't done it recently.
And is it your understanding that there should be no surface manifestation of the waters drip irrigated on either the Angle property or downslope on any other property?
Absolutely. That if there were ever surfacing, that would be a failed zone that would have to be taken off.
Okay. I'm going to ask you, and again, it may not be your domain, and so if it isn't, just let us know so. But I'll introduce this as an exhibit now, just so you all have it, and I don't have to carry it with me. And it is excerpts, so I can be faulted for not showing everything. Right side up. These are excerpts of the zoning ordinance, which is so large.
And what do we want to call your
We are interveners one.
intervener one? So we just do intervener 1 through 9 that you have in this book?
Well, I call the whole thing, and these are tabs to take you to particular sections. Can you share one? I just think I've got enough there.
So we'll make this intervener 1, which are excerpts from the,
This is just for ease of.
Careful, careful. Thank you, sir. And watch your step on the way back.
so
My feet are.
this is just intervener 1, and it's described as excerpts of the zoning ordinance.
Mr. DeFelice, I'd like to ask for an offer of proof. I have my sewer expert here, not a zoning expert. So I ask for an offer of proof of why we're going to go through multiple provisions of the zoning ordinance.
Mr. Blakey, yeah, I would just, you're gonna ask this client, this witness questions about the zoning ordinance?
I was going to ask him, yes, question about Article 4, and I just thought it would be handy to have it available to look at.
Can we clarify if he's even read Article 4?
Pardon?
I think we should clarify if he's even read Article 4.
Well, we can certainly do that. And it's, if you don't want to use it, fine, I'll just try to make reference on my own to it, and but I thought it would be helpful to people.
Okay.
So if you would look, and I think the index is tab 1, and Article 4, then if you look back, it's on page 48 under the table of contents, so I think it's towards the back. So it's under tab 8. And I just showed 4.3, which is a heading called Performance, Traffic, Environmental Protection, and Community Impact Requirements. And the only reason I'm asking about it,
I'm going to object to asking about the zoning ordinance. It's beyond the scope of his direct testimony, number one.
Let's just see what his question is first. I just want to see what his
Go ahead, you're right, I'm sorry.
the question is in all of you, the index to and in your application, I saw no reference to any submission relating to these Article 4 activities. And I just want to see if I've missed something or if they're included.
You did miss something. You missed the zoning officer's determination that we're in the right place asking for a special exception.
I understand that. Okay, so I am not missing that you made a submission of an environmental assessment or anything else. That's the only thing you've submitted in support of this application or what is contained in your exhibit book
and witness testimony.
and witness testimony.
What's supporting it? Well, you're asking about the zoning ordinance. There was a determination, there were two determinations made by the zoning officer with regard to our application for a special exception. And in both of them, she opined that we were asking for the proper thing from a zoning point of view and that we needed a special exception. Whether or not we were entitled to whether or not the use we are asking for is covered by the zoning ordinance was decided by the zoning officer months and months and months ago, and you've had that determination and never appealed from it.
Well, in my mind, it's certainly possible the zoning officer could have been in error, regardless of whether or not there was an appeal.
Then you should have taken an appeal. That's conclusive.
I want the zoning board. Here's my point. It's a legalistic one, and you can disagree with me, and the board can reject it.
Is this something better suited for a closing? I mean, we have a witness here. I just want to move the witnesses along.
Also, I want to know of the witnesses of whether they are aware of having made a submission that conforms in any way to the requirements of this Article 4. And if they,
our submission is our submission.
and let me just finish. The legal argument is, as I understand it, the text amendment specifically exempts I2 and I3 zones from further environmental protection, community impact requirements, these special studies. An R1 zone is not exempt in my understanding, my legal understanding, from the Article 4 requirement. So I'm simply trying to understand if the applicant believes they've submitted anything in compliance with Article 4. And if they think it's not relevant, fine.
Is the question for the applicant or for this witness?
Well, since their witnesses are testifying to what they have submitted, I wanted to understand whether this witness has submitted anything that he would believe conforms to the Article 4 obligations.
That's way beyond the scope of his direct examination. Let me say this. The zoning issue has been decided in this regard, that the proposed use of a drip field on this property, that's been decided a long time ago. If there are other requirements in the zoning or the SALDO, they will have to be dealt with in the land development process. But that has nothing to do with what we're here about.
Okay, so if you're saying they may be applicable later, and that's your view as a matter of law, that's fine.
I think we're long past them too, because we've got land development approval. But if they were to be decided anywhere, they would have had to have been determined in the land development process. And again, that we've gotten the approvals and the appeal period's run.
Right. Well, I just have one last question then for you. It sounds to me in general, and I think you've been very thoughtful and careful in many ways, but that the SBR's effluent quality is so good, why don't you recycle it back into the freshwater system of the development instead of putting it in the drip irrigation field?
That's not done into the potable water system at all in Pennsylvania. It's only reused at Penn State as part of a gray water system. And there may be an opportunity for us that we may actually take some of our treated effluent and use it for non-contact cooling water. That's a possibility, but right now, DEP requires you to have an approved disposal system. You cannot recirculate something until you have a known user. That's why we've chosen the most environmentally friendly means of disposing of the treated effluent.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Well, I don't know if anybody needs, I'm fine.
Let's take 5
Yeah,
minutes.
I mean,
Take 5 minutes.
yeah.
We're about halfway, so.
I couldn't last.
Well, everybody was just getting up and going.
Good to go?
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's probably the fire truck.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Ebert. Council's obviously asked a bunch of questions. I'm going to try and, I may be jumping around a little bit, but I have some questions for you. So let's start, actually I want to start, at the end of the last meeting, we were here at the end of February, you were asked by Attorney Blakesy about the selection of the site, and you answered that question. So I just want to ask about your response that you put on the record then. The question was, did you look at any other sites on your property, particularly the I-2 property you have, for the location of the drip irrigation field? And that was the question that was asked. It wasn't objected to at that point. And your answer was, yes, we looked as well as on our property, as well as many other adjoining properties. And you went on to say the best drainage classification was on this property. So based upon that response that you gave previously, did you look at other properties other than the one that is the subject of this exception?
You said that this is testimony from the last hearing?
Correct.
And you said that he testified that they did look at other properties?
I'm just read into the record what he put in, was in the transcript.
I'm just trying to
Yep.
clarify the question. You're saying that he did say that last time, and now you're asking if he said that they did test it?
I'm just asking if he did and what other properties did he look at?
I'm going to object for the same reason I objected before. We're not here about other properties. We're here about a special exception for one property. So whether he looked at other properties or not is really irrelevant.
I mean, in my opinion, I think Mr. Cousins indicated that he testified previously that they did look at other properties, and now he's asking again if they did look at other properties, and I think it sounds like the answer would be the same, but.
Well, I think he's asking what properties were looked at. Is that what your question is?
I'm following up on the question that you did not object to last time about whether or not they looked at other properties, particularly the I-2 property you have for the location of the drip irrigation field. That was the question that asked, and so I want to know if that was done and what properties were looked
And
at.
I'm going to object to the question at this point. I think it's totally irrelevant. We're
I'll
not.
overrule it to the extent that he's asking, did you look at other properties? Not what other properties, but that's what he asked.
I'm sorry. I think your microphone is actually off.
Okay. So I said, I don't know if anybody could not hear me. I mean, I think, just so I'm understanding the question is, did you look at other properties or other sites? And you're saying that as a follow-up to a question that was asked last time about whether or not Mr. Ebert looked at other properties, and his response at last hearing, at least according to you, Mr. Cousins, was that they did look at other properties. And now you're asking again, did they look at other properties?
Right.
Okay. I'll overrule it to that extent.
And the answer is yes.
Okay. All right, I'll move on from that. Obviously, we'll follow up with, let me ask you this. So, I want to ask a little bit about your other experiences with the drip fields. You talked us a little bit about it this evening last time, and you also talked about it. It's in your CV that is attached to the submissions to a certain extent. I want to ask you about some of that. I wasn't clear from your prior testimony whether or not you have done a system like this that is exclusively for industrial waste, or has it always been a mix of industrial and residential?
It's always been a mix.
Okay, so this is the first one where it's only industrial.
At this point, yes. I think there's capacity allocated in our agreement for future residential, but at this point, I would say yes.
Okay, and the capacity that you currently are proposing is for 200,000 gallon, 200,000 What is the capacity currently per day? Let me not say that, and you can answer for me.
The current application is for 101,640 gallons per day.
Right, and what's the capacity of the system that you've designed?
The initial phase will be 200,000 gallons per day of treatment capacity, with the ability to expand it to 400,000 gallons in the future. Right now, we are limited to the estimated wastewater that will be generated by the project, which is 101,640 gallons per day.
Okay.
100 and what?
1,640.
So now I'm gonna go,
Just, would you tell them why, what you mean by you're limited?
Okay, I can only permit for what I can get sewage facilities planning for. So even though I'm gonna design and construct a 200,000, I will be limited to what I can justify an actual need today for. So if additional residential houses come online and disposal capacity is there, we'll increase the permitted capacity. It won't increase the physical structures. They're gonna exist. DEP will just change the permit to once sewage facilities planning is approved for those additional needs or uses.
and in the expansion, on the potential expansion, let's say the DEP has those approvals, will the actual physical footprint of the drip irrigation field increase as a result?
On this property, no.
Okay, and so is the current field that 22.6 acres that you've designated of this 90 acre, or approximately 90 acre site, is that capable of the full 400,000 per day that you currently design?
No.
Okay, so where will additional drip have to go?
I don't know at this point, and I don't know that there's any additional need beyond that. So that's just written in there as an example, and when and if a user comes up, we'll have to identify additional disposal capacity.
Is there on the current site where you're proposing this drip irrigation system, is there ability to increase the amount of physical drip irrigation site on that particular location?
You didn't ask the right question, but I'm going to try to answer it.
Please do.
So we're not going to, the answer to that question is no. We're not going to change the footprint. But right now, the soil science and hydrogeologic would allow for up to 123,516 gallons per day to be disposed. I, as an engineer, say that I'm going to lose 10% of that during the approval process and construction. 5% during, so you could potentially have 111,000, I forget the exact number, but I can't justify that need. So the science in my planning module says you could put up to 123,000 gallons on here. The field, the wetted area of the field will not increase. I'm just applying it at a lower loading rate.
Okay. You testified earlier about switching, because I'm jumping around because of the questions, but you testified earlier the 600,000 gallon tank that you're currently planning for this phase. That is the holding for 6 days, you said, correct? Approximately.
Yeah. So you have to provide 3 days minimum holding time. The treatment plant will be designed as a 200,000 gallon a day treatment plant times 3 days is 600,000 gallons. But because today my application is only for 100,000, it's basically 6 days.
Okay. And you testified previously that the discharge wouldn't be discharged out of that tank for a day. How do you distinguish between what goes into the tank and what goes out? How do you know that something gets into that tank, it's not going to be mixed in and sent out?
It is commingled.
Okay.
It absolutely is. It enters in at one side and it leaves at the other side, and it's not mixed or agitated because it's covered storage. So theoretically, it's plug flow going across, but I can't prove how long one's in there, other than It enters at the right side of the tank, it leaves at the left side of the tank, and the tank is not mixed.
So
So
that-
it theoretically takes a day to get across that tank.
So that idea that it wouldn't get out because it's held for a day, that's not strictly true then, right? That it's commingled in there.
It could be
and the
commingled.
physics of it.
It
Okay.
could be commingled.
So in theory, you could have something get out on the effluent side.
Theoretically, yes.
Okay. So going back to the systems that you have worked on, and have any of the systems that you've designed so far been this 200,000 gallon per day system of that capacity?
Well, Upper Euclid, we just did an expansion, it's gonna take it up to basically 800,000 gallons.
Okay. And how much of that is industrial?
Limited, there's a Route 100 corridor that has a number of commercial and industrial properties along that Route 100 corridor, but I would say it's a small fraction.
Okay. Could you give me an estimate of what percentage, what?
I'd be totally guessing at this point.
And so you can't tell me even a rough estimate of of the $800,000 gallon capacity, how much of that is industrial commercial?
I'd say it's probably 10 to 20% at most.
Okay. And is that the largest system that you've worked on?
With drip irrigation,
Drip irrigation?
it's the largest in the state.
Okay. And the other ones that you list in here on your CV, like the Windsor Ridge,
See, Windsor Ridge is all part of the Upper Euclid system.
Okay.
A lot of those there are the components that make up the Upper Euclid or Windsor Ridge facility. There are different disposal fields that were done for each different developer. And that's where, while it's 800,000 ultimately, you'll see like 71,000, 45,000, all these are all places where they were developed over time, much the way this one will be developed. That it starts out as a small treatment and disposal, and then as demand increases, additional disposal fields are developed throughout the township. And that will be the same basic thing here, maybe not throughout the township, but throughout the area in different parts, of there. And that's very common land application, that you only build what you can utilize, because you don't want that, you don't want the drip tubing sitting in there not being utilized.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to move on to a different topic now. You testified about some interaction with Portland at your last deposition. And I'm paraphrasing here, but you were clear that Portland wouldn't have the capacity to deal with all the wastewater that was needed for this site, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, but you also testified, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you inquired of them about what their capacity was, but you didn't have a clear response from them.
That's correct. We actually met with them a number of times in their engineer.
And so you don't know, as you see here today, what capacity they would be able to take care of sewer.
The
in
answer
their sewer
is,
system.
we're waiting back to hear back from Portland. So I know what the rated capacity of their treatment plant is. I know what their usage is. However, they want to allow for the future development and redevelopment within their political boundaries. So they want to reserve that amount of capacity. They are currently doing a study right now to determine what that future need is, so they could decide if there is an excess that they would be willing to sell to another municipality.
So as we see here, you don't know what that is currently.
No, they haven't gotten back to us, but we have
Okay.
asked.
And so you move forward with this plan, correct?
That's correct.
So it wouldn't require Portland's sewer system under the plan that you're submitting?
No, right now, no. This is a standalone system.
You mentioned earlier about failure. I think it was in response to Attorney Blakeslee's questioning about a failure, and you indicated you hadn't had any. I'm not sure if failure was the right word, but some kind of event where things had to be shut down and reseeded, correct? You remember testifying about that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and then at the end of that, you said, except in a flood.
Okay.
Right, so tell us about a flood.
It's not an SBR. Schweitzel Borough Authority had over 100 million or 100-year flood event that went over the top of their berm and literally went over the top of their treatment plant. As a result of that, the sludge was washed into the creek, and they had to reseed the treatment plant. I can pretty much guarantee you, this plant will not flood,
Okay. And why is that?
because it's about 600 feet above the river. At least.
Okay.
We're all in trouble if this floods, we're in trouble.
All right. I want to ask you now about, and this may be a question best reserved for the other professionals who are going to testify tonight, about sort of following up on Attorney Blakesley's questions about testing. Did you have a role or determination in what was tested for, either in groundwater sampling or soil sampling?
No,
Okay, that was determined by other professionals, correct?
that's correct.
And do you know whether that was something that was determined as based upon what are the requirements, or did they go beyond the requirements? Do you have any idea?
No, you'd have to ask them.
Okay. And we have a number of testing results that are included in the packet which was provided previously. So those levels that can talk about what the standards are and what the test results were, again, is that something that you would leave to the other professionals?
Yes,
Okay. So I won't waste my time asking you about that. But in general terms, do you indicated that heavy metals, you know that those are not something that was tested for. Is that fair?
I don't believe that it is. You'll have to ask the hydrogeologist what was tested for.
Okay.
But DEP establishes a requirement of what has to be tested for as part of land application process.
Okay. The treatment plant is on sort of an elevated side, an elevated position, correct? The treatment plant is elevated?
That's correct.
And you testified about why that was at the last hearing, correct?
Yes.
And as far as the actual irrigation field, is what kind of elevation is that in relation to Potomac Road and the treatment plant?
It's lower in both
Okay.
cases.
And is there any danger of the higher elevation causing any problems with the effluent? The higher elevation of the treatment plant in relation to the field itself causing any problems?
No, and the dosing of the field is controlled by solenoid valves. So when we shut it off, and that's why we use pressure compensating emitters that give the same exact gallons per hour from 6 psi to 60 psi.
Okay. Those solenoid, I think you talked about that in response to one of the board members' questions at the end of the last testimony. They look like sticks sticking out of the ground in the photos you have from your horse pastures, right?
No,
Yeah. Those are not the solenoids that you were talking about?
now, solenoids are underground.
Okay, so what is that we're looking at that's on that exhibit 23 that is sticking out of the ground?
Oh.
I thought you.
Is this the picture you're looking at?
I can go back to the transcript. You testified, and I can find exactly.
Well, I will tell you exactly what it is.
Right,
They are metal stakes
right.
that are out of the ground so that people don't mow over the plastic lids to the vaults that contain the solenoid valves 3 feet down. So they are simply markers so landscapers don't destroy it and hit it accidentally with a mower.
Okay. So tell me a little bit more about these solenoid valves and how they work.
So a solenoid valve is an electrically actuated valve that is an electrically actuated valve that I will send a signal and it will open, and then I will send a signal and it will close. So all they do is open and close a valve. It's a valve that opens and closes.
And and what controls why the valves open and close? I mean, apart from it being a solenoid, why do they open and close?
They open and close to either dose or flush an individual field, and it isolates the field. So we may dose, there's a programmable logic controller that will identify how many fields and how many zones are dosed at a time and at a certain rate and duration. So it will open. There will basically be a clock that will count down to a predetermined amount of time, and then it will close, and then it will open the next valve, and it will continue to cycle through the entire field, and then repeat itself 5 times a day.
And in terms, is there something in the protocols and the systems that you designed to set up to deal with the maintenance of those solenoid valves?
Yes, we can shut off any zone or any field to perform maintenance. So we actually will basically think of like a handoff auto. I will disable that zone, and it will automatically skip over that or skip over a portion of a zone. That's why we manifold them into many, many small components so they can be taken out without having a significant impact. Significant impact will be losing less than 5% of the disposal capacity, and that's why I designed it to dose over approximately a 22-hour day. So if I have to dose one a little bit extra to catch up, I have that in the 23rd and 24th hour of each day.
Just check. All right, Mr. Ebert, those are the questions I have for you. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone that's requested party status, we'll start. Raymond Hanson. Is Mr. Hanson here? Mr. Hanson is not here. Josue Batista. Raymond Hanson. Mr. Batista's not here. I'm sorry, Mr. Hanson's not here. Mr. Batista, come up to the podium, please, if you have any questions for this witness.
Mr. Batista, and I'm 4 Potomac Street. At this moment, I don't have any questions.
For Mr. Ebert? Okay. Okay. Mr. Angle?
Good evening. I just have one question. The grass that you'll be planting on the field, the 22 acres, that will be cut from time to time. Will that be bailable?
Yes, it will actually be cut and baled and removed.
And could be fed to livestock?
Nothing that can be used for human consumption, but yes, it's a lot of, usually it's used for mulch, quite honestly, is what we do, but you could use it for horses or other things.
You could use it for cattle. Right?
Yeah, well, technically, it should really be used for,
These are beef cattle.
yeah,
Not
I
dairy
mean,
cattle.
I wouldn't, I would use it for horse hay or mulch hay.
Okay, thank you.
Derek Walcott. Mr. Walcott's not here. Okay. Stevenson Brandable. So we have all these people that requested party status that are not here. Okay. Mr. Joy, he was here. No longer here. Mr. Clark? Clark. C-L-A-R-K.
Fred Clark, Crystal, 19 Crystal Terrace, Upper Mount Bethel. I don't know how this process goes, so I don't know
You
if
can
I
ask
ask
this-
questions, Mr. Kaplan.
No.
Oh, I don't know if,
These are questions for Mr. Ebert for this witness.
okay, all right. So I have 3 general areas for clarification about your testimony. I do have a question for you. Is testimony that has been given in other township venues, like, say, the planning commission, the special planning commission, is that allowable in this?
Testimony of who?
of Fred Ebert into the 6/25/23 meeting that was referred to earlier that no one could, that was a special planning commission meeting where Fred Ebert first presented, or he presented the design of the system. And so I have specific testimony or specific language that he used, and I'd like to get clarification about what he meant by it and what it means for this process.
I would suggest you ask that he clarify that it's the same plan and the same design now.
Sure.
Because if it's not, I would say that it's irrelevant, and you can't ask that, but.
Okay, but if it's materially the same, that's, yeah. So I guess then I'm gonna start off script. Fred, is this materially the same system that you presented on this, at the 6/25/23 meeting? Has there been any major changes?
Major, probably not. We've received more data and we've completed more analyses and we've refined things since then, but conceptually it has not changed.
Okay, well, I'm gonna ask my question. I'm gonna format the context for my questions, and then if I'm out of bounds, someone can correct me. All right, so I'm gonna have three areas I'm gonna ask you about. The choice of the Potomac West field, you know, the things that went into it. The implications of using the Potomac West field, and then specific analysis that was done regarding the design of the system. Those are the three areas that I'd like to ask about. So what I would ask is that there may be multi-part questions, so let me get to the end of it, and then you can decide that, you know, I can repeat anything. All right, I don't want to spend all day. Mr. Kaplan might.
Please ask
Yes.
the question.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Clerk, don't, ask one question at a time, please,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. All right, I think it's important to start with the selection process for the Potomac West property for the off-site disposal field. I would like to refresh your memory, this is specifically to you. I'd like to refresh your memory about a discussion we had, that's you and I, Fred Ebert and Fred Clark, at the 6/25 special planning meeting about the selection of the Potomac West, also called Angle Field. I've done my best to capture the relevant parts of the conversation, but if you have a transcript or need to correct anything I say when I'm done, please feel free. This is my statement, Fred Clark, specifically, why, Jesus, why was you called the West? Why did you choose the field? Is it because of the hydrology of the land? Was there no suitable land?
One question at a time.
Okay.
Why did you choose
This is a quote. This is not a question for him. I'm giving him the context of the conversation we had.
That's not really proper.
Okay, all right.
I think you have to ask the question to him. You'd be testifying otherwise.
Oh, okay. See, that's what I need to know. So, a question. Fred, you made the statement, at least I believe, you made the statement, the soils were much better on Potomac West and there was a high concentration of good soils. Quite honestly, that's why Potomac West has historically been farmed and the RPL property was not converted to farmland. Does that sound like the statement that you would have made?
Yes.
Okay.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
All right. After providing, we had some other conversations, all right, but then after providing some comments on your observations about essential use and such, you made the statement, and I don't want to say this out of context, so please understand.
Please ask the
Okay,
question.
sorry, okay. I didn't look at zoning. I didn't look at anything. I just looked at the best available soils for my disposal system and picked the best available. I responded that as an engineer designing a system, I would have done the same, but followed with the fact that as a resident with someone else's industrial waste being dumped in my neighborhood, I did not believe it was necessary to build this field off the 800-acre site covered by the text amendment. Do you remember that conversation going something like that?
Objection.
Okay.
Whether or not he remembers that conversation or not is not relevant. Is there some question that I think you should be asking
All
a
right.
question?
All right.
And not
Okay.
repeating
Fine.
what he says
Fine.
is
I-
a conversation.
Specifically, since it's a zoning hearing board, you said you did not look at zoning, all right? Do you recall making that statement? Now, remember, this was in the context of essential use.
The question was, did you make that statement?
I very well may have, because I honestly look at the science, I look at the soil drainage classification, level of groundwater, and that is my determining criteria, not the underlying zoning. That's what the attorneys are for, so I don't remember if I said it in that exact context, but I clearly would have made that statement.
Okay, and that's what I thought. You know, I agree that you're not a lawyer.
Objection.
Sorry, okay. Following the statement on the soils were better on Potomac West, that was a true statement, I believe you just said, that you would have made that statement.
Yeah, I would
Okay.
definitely agree with
All
that.
right. Was a formal evaluation of the suitability of the land in the I-2 and I-3 zones for the drip irrigation performed? Because, see, in order to say that the soils were superior, in order to say that the support,
You asked the question.
okay,
Objection. Again, we're not here about the soils on the I-2 property. We're not here about why you chose this rather than something else. We're here about whether or not we meet the criteria for a special exception.
I mean, the application is specific for this particular property. Now, if it was a request for a variance, maybe that would be something that would be relevant, because one of the criteria for variance would be whether or not it could essentially be put somewhere else. But to the extent that, you know, it falls under this application for a special exception for this particular property, I do think it's irrelevant to that extent.
so,
I'm going to sustain the objection there.
so, any analysis, this is a question for you. So any analysis regarding the quality of this property, all right, and the suitability of this property is not a concern of the...
No, about this particular property, yes.
Okay, all right, okay. So, per the executive summary, the proposed sanitary sewer and water facilities for the River Point Logistics Center, Upper Mount Bethel Township, dated June 2nd, 2023, from VW Consultants, all right? They conducted a detailed soil testing of the Potomac West property or disposal field. All soil testing and conductivity testing was witnessed by this is a quote from your thing.
Objection.
And I have a question.
Objection.
All right.
There's no question.
I'm going to get to a question.
Is this an exhibit that you're referring to?
This is an exhibit. This is
an
actually,
exhibit?
this is the VW Consultants, see, I don't have the benefit of the binder.
Okay.
So if the VW Consultants report is in it,
Where did you get this report? I don't know what this is. I'm not even sure if I have it, so I don't know how to answer your
it
question.
was it was also a part of the presentation at the June 23rd, 2023 meeting. It's the study that says that these soils are good for the purpose it's being requested.
What's the date you have?
The date of this study is June 2nd, 2023.
And it was done by who?
VW Consultants LLC.
Do you want to admit that as an exhibit?
Wait a minute. I'm going to call Joe Valentine as a witness.
Is that Joe Valentine? Okay.
Yeah, VW.
Okay.
It's Joe Valentine.
All right. It characterizes the soils. All right, then I'll wait. If VW is Joe Valentine, then I will wait to ask him these questions. That's fine. All right.
Okay.
All right. Skip that. So, no No testimony regarding the characteristics of the I-2 and I-3 zones as to their suitability is going to be allowed?
Objection.
Yes, okay, I'm asking you, that's what I thought, okay. All right, Fred, this is a question specifically for you. In your experience, if zoning boards, in your experience, have zoning boards you were before ever required an essential service case to be made before granting a special exception use for off-site sewage drip disposal fields in an R1 zone?
Conditional use, definitely. I don't know if it was special exception. I honestly couldn't answer that.
Okay.
I have testified about this in residential, in front of zoning hearing boards. I don't remember what the exact reasoning, whether special exception, conditional use, but I definitely have appeared and haven't been approved numerous times.
Okay, were municipal authorities involved in those cases, to the best of your recollection?
Not all. Some of
Okay.
them were townships.
Some of them were.
And there's definitely one of them where it's Aqua, Pennsylvania. New Gardens, Aqua, Pennsylvania.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And just New Gardens, that's a privately
So
owned,
New Garden is a township in Chester County.
okay,
Aqua, Pennsylvania is a third-party PUC regulated company,
okay, private company,
private company, yes.
It operates that wastewater system.
understood.
All right, I believe this has been covered, but this is Potomac West Field designed for about 101,640 gallons per day, is that correct?
That's what it'll be permitted for?
Permitted, that's what it's permitted for.
It'll be permitted for that.
Do you 101 or 111?
101,
Okay,
comma,
so wait a minute.
640.
It's a one, right now, the science labels it as 123,516 gallons per day. That's what's in my planning module. I, at this stage, take a 10% reduction, which 5% during permitting and approvals and 5% for construction accidents that happen, which would yield you approximately 111,000 gallons per day.
And I just wanted to clarify, because Mr. Clark, I think you said 101,
101,640.
but he said 111.
Yes, it is 100, and then we're gonna permit it for 101,640,
That was
because that's all I can justify the
Right.
flows for.
Right.
So there's three numbers.
I got you.
Permitted will be down there.
And the 123,
It will be permitted for the 101,640.
and the total capacity based on the science is 123 what?
516 gallons per day.
Okay,
All right.
sorry.
All right, so my question, Fred, as designed, is the disposal of the RPL sewage on the Potomac West site considered on-site, on-lot, or off-site disposal?
I would consider it land application of treated effluent.
What does, oh boy. Does, as, under that classification, could you restate that again?
I would consider it PADEP permitted land application of treated effluent. Because it's permitted by a water quality management permit, unlike an SEO issued permit for an individual system.
Right, under that classification, does Title 25, Chapter 73 standards for on-site sewage treatment facilities apply? And would the state agree with that?
Not at all.
No, it doesn't apply.
Does not apply.
Okay, all right, good to know. All right, hold on, pardon me, like I said, I have to jump around. Given that an agricultural field was found to be superior for use as a drip disposal field over that of the I-2 and I-3 properties, is it reasonable to assume that more R1 property will be needed if the demand of the sewage treatment facility is required, since there is no I-2 and I-3 anymore in the town? Is it reasonable to assume that any new disposal areas would be zoned R1?
No.
No. So the rest of the town is all zoned R1.
There could be some that it could end up there.
I maybe didn't ask it properly. If more disposal fields are required, it will have to come from the remaining land in the town, right?
Mhm.
And the remaining land in the town is zoned R1 to the best of my knowledge. So that means that any additional sewage disposal would have to happen on an R1 zone? No? Okay. If that,
No.
okay. Okay, okay, it's fine. I don't understand it, but, all right. In the last meeting, I believe it was the last meeting here, okay, you testified, you know, in front of this board, you testified that this system will handle the sewage needs of RPL at full build-out. Does that sound true?
At what is currently, what we're designing for, getting sewage facilities planning, yes. That is subject to change throughout the approval process as actual tenants are known and identified.
Okay, could you elaborate what full build-out is? Is that all the RPL properties? Like, in other words, there's an RPL East and RPL,
No.
it is not all the RPL properties?
The sewage facilities planning module right now is for the 13 buildings that are on, I don't know how to, I call it the RPL property, not RPL East or New Demi Road, or one of the others right now, like New Demi has an individual on-lot system and permitted.
All right.
So, and I call them Gen on North and South, you know, I'm not sure what they're properly known as, but those properties are not part of this application.
Those parties are not.
Those
okay.
properties are not part of the sewage
The
facilities
100
planning
right,
module.
So the 101,640 would not cover those other properties. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Is there a process, I think you've already answered this, is there a process for requesting an increase in the permitted capacity of the Potomac West field? In other words, you say that there's 123,000 gallon, whatever the exact number is, availability. Let's say that it was decided that you wanted to use all the capacity of that field. Is there a process for going up to that limit, or would you presume that rather than doing that, it would be preferred to build another field somewhere, disposal field?
I can't, let me answer that in parts. Is there a process? Yes.
Okay.
The first step in the process is to revise the sewage facilities planning to justify the need. The second part of that process would be to amend the water quality management permit to increase the capacity up to the 123,000 gallons. With that said, when I build this plant, if I don't lose anything during design or during design approvals or construction, and it's the 123, I can raise it right up to that. If I lost some, you know, a field somebody ran over it, we had to pull it back in, whatever that final as-built design capacity is, that's the maximum that I can permit this field for.
Okay, and would that be a preferred approach over building another field, or I guess it would depend on the magnitude. It depends on the
Yeah, if
magnitude
it's
of what comes in.
5,000 gallons,
Fine.
I'm gonna re-rate this field. If
Okay.
it's 40,000, I'm gonna
Right.
build a new field.
Right, okay. All right, in the past, I call it the Angle Field, but it's our Potomac West, all right, has had sludge spread on it for farming purposes. Is it safe to assume?
I don't think it's ever had sludge. I think it's had manure.
No, it's sludge.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So, I guess the amount of rainwater in Pennsylvania in this area is around 50 inches, 50 inches a year.
I know the net evapotranspiration, but you're probably about right.
And I think that my calculations, and I'm not an expert witness, said that you were going to put about twice an annual rainfall on that field per year. So regardless, let's say that you're increasing. Will the increased water effluent being put on that field speed the migration of anything that's already there through the ground?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. All right, so the soil experts will talk about whether it's been tested for whatever that sludge might have in it. All right, so now I'm gonna move on to the design questions, all right, and they're simple. Has a detailed failure modes and effect analysis, FEMA.
Sorry, Mr. Clark, again, please.
Sorry?
Again.
Oh, I'm sorry. Has a detailed failure modes and effects analysis, it's known as FMEA, been performed on the system as designed?
Not at this time.
Okay. Have reliability-centered maintenance principles been applied to the design?
Not at this time. I have to get zoning, sewage facilities planning, and then I go to
Okay,
detailed
you're not at
design.
that level. Okay, my other questions may come to the same answer, but you're not at that level of design yet.
That's correct.
And is that because you really kind of need the municipal authority engineer to agree with you on the design, is that a limiting, does that limit progress?
He would need to ultimately approve my
Would approve it.
design.
You don't need him to,
I wouldn't need him to do that, but I obviously have to get zoning approval, then sewage facilities planning to know exactly what I'm designing, and then I would go to detailed design, so it's a very linear process.
are studies like failure modes, and I'm not familiar with what you use for reliability in a sewage system. Are studies like failure modes and effects analysis, reliability-centered maintenance, mean time between failures, are those kinds of studies typical in the design of systems like this?
No, not directly. The way you're using them in industry, we're more highly regulated, and so we have to have redundancy. So like failures can't really happen because we just switch to another piece of equipment automatically.
Well, I worked in a nuclear power.
Objection.
Sorry, okay, all right, you're right. Has an analysis of the system's vulnerability to a major disruption of a power system, such as the failure of the transformers at the switching station, been performed? Sorry. I'm used to reading in the 3-minute increments. As an analysis of the system's vulnerability to major disruption of the power system, such as a failure of the transformers at the switching station, been performed?
It would not be required to be performed because we provide 100% redundant emergency power. So I will have an emergency generator at both the pump station as well as a treatment plant that will also power everything to go down to the drip disposal field. The drip disposal field will actually have a battery backup that will open and close the solenoid valves. So I can lose total power and function 100% exactly the same.
And that same generator would be supporting all the valves at the outputs of the industrial facilities? In other words, to actuate the valves outside of all
Well, at the individual ones, I can't answer because I don't know if there'll be individual generators at every facility. If there's no power, they really shouldn't be generating. But, so it would actually stop the flow from going there. So they would either have to shut down their operation. The regional pump station will have emergency power backup. But at the individual, I can't answer that because I haven't seen the design of their buildings.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, I guess I can ask it a different way. Are the valves fail-safe? In other words, do they fail closed? The valves at the individual buildings, is it assumed that they're going to fail closed to stop anything from getting past them in that event?
The answer is, it's not a valve, it's a pump, and yes,
Oh, they don't-
pumps don't work without power.
Okay, all right, so.
So absolutely, they fail, no flow going through when they fail.
They fail closed. You
Yes,
go to
they fail
closed
closed.
system. Okay, got it. Has the possibility of over-designing the monitoring and protective features of the system been considered? For example, increasing the number of monitoring wells around the field, increasing the frequency of testing the wells, or installing real-time monitoring on the wells?
I'm going to object. These are questions for the hydrogeologist
No,
or
no,
the
no,
soil
This
scientist.
is, this is system design.
Can we just ask them one at a time?
Oh, I'm sorry, okay, I will. I'll go back.
And we haven't done the design, sorry.
What I'm asking,
I think he's gonna give me the same answer he did before. We haven't got to that level of design
Yeah.
yet. But I just wondered if you considered overbuilding this, the protective features of the system.
Not at this time, I haven't.
Okay, all right, all right. All right, and my last question, and this is kind of going backwards a hair. Does the quarterly testing, that's like a government mandate, but does that take into account the rate of migration of anything through I mean, it's really not going to take that into account. is it?
Objection.
Sorry, is the quarterly testing, let's say you put 5 times as much water in that, on a field, all right, that would speed it up a lot, but the quarterly testing wouldn't accommodate that. Is that true?
Objection. Please ask a question.
Does the quarterly monitoring have any relationship to the rate at which migration happens in the field?
No.
Okay, thank you, that's what I thought the answer was. All right, I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Ebert. It's instructional as always.
The next person I have identified as with party status is Michael Lorero. Other absent party, okay. Joan Gibbs.
Joan Gibbs, 30 Summerfield Drive. Mr. Ebert, a few questions for you. I am not an engineer, so forgive me. You have a significant body of work as an engineer. I'm interested in understanding what percentage of that work has been focused on designing and having built drip irrigation fields in residential areas versus non-residentially zoned areas.
I believe that all my drip fields are in residentially zoned areas.
And when you look at designing in residential areas, is there a different approach that you take, residential versus non-residential?
No.
At some point in time, could the drip system be converted for use beyond biological waste?
No.
For businesses that are being placed in the industrial park, there was a reference that there will not be any floor drains allowed. My question is, after these firms have passed inspection, could floor drains be installed post-approval of the sites?
That's why the municipal industrial pretreatment requires that the authority or regulatory body, the township authority or PUC, go back in and perform regular inspections to make sure that it doesn't happen.
Okay. What would prohibit illegal dumping in the area of the drip field?
As far as,
So for example, people dump tires, people dump unauthorized things in fields all around Pennsylvania. So I'm curious, is there like a safety wall that contains?
no, it's the same exposure that you have today. The same exact exposure of that field being illegally dumped on today, it will exist tomorrow.
Okay. So you mentioned that approximately 22 acres of the property is going to be used for the industrial drip field, and that is for biological waste.
There is no industrial drip fields, so there is just land application using drip irrigation.
Okay. So what happens to the rest of the land? Have plans been evaluated in terms of the 22 acres that will not, beyond the 22 acres that are going to be developed?
Normally, the entire parcel is conveyed to the authority and it's then basically preserved open space. but I don't know, until that land transaction, but there is a buffer zone, and we need to protect the drip irrigation fields. So it is normally, I don't want to call it preserved open space, but it's open space that would be only used for passive activities, not any active activities. So it's normally preserved.
Thank you.
Corey Eckman? Eckman,
Yes. So you answered one of the questions, what's gonna be left with the, only using 22 acres out of the 89. But what was brought up, about, okay, let's see if we can bale this grass, donate it to a farmer, let him feed his cows. You're saying it's only for horses. So if it's potable water, you're saying that the water that's going in is safe, it's potable, but yet you can't,
I never said it was potable.
you have stated that the
Never
water
stated
comes
that it was
out,
potable water.
that it was clean. We've been told-
Clean and potable are two different words, and I've only ever stated that it is clean effluent, not that it's potable. Potable implies drinking water.
At a township meeting, somebody said about drinking it, and you're like,
Objection.
well, it could be, but I wouldn't.
Objection.
No, never
Is
said.
there a
Okay.
question?
So, you can't feed a cow with that, or only horses, because, if you take a cow and it gets butchered. What about the deer that cross through it and eat the grass, and a hunter shoots it, takes it home and eats it?
Uh-huh.
So, if it's not good for a cow, humans can digest it by eating now a deer, but yet it's still going by residents' wells. So,
I'm just telling you what the DEP regulations are.
so it's still not good to be digested by eating cattle.
I'm just telling you what DEP regulations are. What I can do with the disposal of that crop grass. They just regulate it. Not that it's safe or not, it's when it's regulated, and that's what the regulations are.
So DEP says it can't go into cattle, but yet it's okay to go into the ground by people's wells.
Yes.
Doesn't make sense. Thank you.
That's the last person with party status that I had. I think it's 9:48, at least according to my clock. It's probably a good time to start, because I think the next witness, we're not even really close to.
Mr. DeFelice, did the board have any
Oh,
additional
yeah.
questions?
I'm sorry. Board members have any questions after that follow-up?
One
Mr.
question, Fred, to the best of your knowledge, what's the average pH in the leaching field as it's being treated?
It's right at 7, because it comes out of the treatment plant, just about there. So, I would say 6.8 to 7.2.
So we're roughly talking a neutral pH.
Yeah, you have very neutral pH.
And storage of the chemicals, where's that gonna be? The enzymes, whatever else we'll be using, the phosphorus?
It probably want to be, honestly, it'd probably be soda ash for pH adjustment as it comes in. And then, that would probably be the only chemical that we would actually use, because the other chemicals are used to precipitate out phosphorus, which I wouldn't necessarily do here, like alum, that it would precipitate phosphorus out. But they would be stored in a double wall containment at the treatment plant, nothing on this disposal field.
Okay, and forgive me, I'm looking at this in 2D. How tall is this water tower?
The what?
The water tower?
The water tower is actually 70 feet.
I'm sorry.
The potable water tower,
I'm looking at a print that says water tower here.
that's approximately 70 feet in elevation.
70.
70.
Okay, and the two tanks, one proposed, one to catch the influent, and turn it into the bad stuff.
Yeah.
They're subterranean.
No, the effluent storage would actually be probably a 20-foot high above ground tank. The treatment plant tankage will be below ground. They'll stick out about 18 inches.
The vault itself.
The treatment tanks
Yeah.
will be on below ground. The effluent storage will be above ground, because I want to have a flooded suction to my pump. So that would be above ground in a precast post-tension concrete tank with a roof.
Okay, last question.
On the RPL side.
On the RPL side.
On your,
Thank you.
last question, don't object. average pressure coming into the system from the force main is anywhere between 20 and 60 pounds. You know, you said it, I thought you said something before.
Okay.
What's the average pressure on that system at any given time? Approximately. I'm not gonna hold.
You're probably pretty good between 20 to 30 pounds.
Okay.
And it will put the same exact amount out from 6 PSI to 60 PSI. I normally design for 20 to 30 PSI throughout. That way, you know, if something happens as a pump wears out, it goes down, or if I get a surge, I'm not gonna blow anything out. So that's probably you're probably about right.
All right, and the piping going out to the leaching field is probably perforated PVC?
No.
All right, tell me.
It'll all be pressurized pipe. It'll be at least SDR 21, 200 PSI class pipe. Nothing's perforated, and then the drip field, this is actually drip.
That's what I mean, going out into the leach it.
These, right, they're one continuous piece of
that.
Yeah, I call it HDP, I'm not sure what the proper term is.
Okay, below the frost line?
No, 6 to 8 inches below grade. And it is, well, the dosing mains are below frost grade. The actual drip emitters are 6 to 8 inches above, and they don't freeze because they put 50-degree water out 5 times a day. And it's almost the reverse of a geothermal well.
Okay.
You're putting warm water out there the entire time, and it transfers it in with a grass crop on top.
Okay, so, we're putting this water out all the time. Chances are, walking on that field is gonna be a little bit moist for people if
Nope.
they decide to do it?
Nope.
Dry?
Exactly the same as any other grass field you ever walk on. Nope, it's not. If it was spongy, that would be a problem.
That's what I mean.
If it was spongy, that would indicate the beginning of a failing system and something that the water is going up rather than down.
Okay.
Water should, and that's why I rely so heavily on soil classification and drainage, because I want it all to go down. If I'm putting it, 8 inches below the surface, it shouldn't be spongy because that water should be draining straight down by gravity.
Got it. Thank you. I'm good.
I think Mr. Blasey had a couple of follow-up questions from one of his clients, so.
Pretty brief. Talking about trucking in and trucking out, are you planning any trucking in or contemplating as the system is first started, if loads are low, that you would bring in wastewaters at all, or is that not contemplated?
We will actually haul our wastewater out to another larger facility, but it is possible and it's not uncommon to have other holding tank waste from residential brought into a facility to help start it up. That happens not irregularly.
Okay. And in terms of winter rates, we dig down 3 or 4 feet sometimes for foundations because of frost levels. What does 8 inches have to do with frost or diffusion of water in the winter?
Objection, this question was just answered.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
He was talking with.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So why does it not freeze? Because it's basically the reverse of a geothermal system where we're injecting 50-degree water 5 times a day, which creates a heat sink. It also has additional insulation by allowing the grass crop that's on top acts as an insulation layer. And then I'm adding 50-degree water 5 times a day, which prevents it from freezing.
Okay. And I think the last question is really about operator reliability. If these are one person, this is a 24/7 operation?
No, it's not 24/7. There will be licensed operators out at the facility during the day. I don't know whether it'll be 1 to 3 or 4 a day that will be out there. Any kind of maintenance, you basically have to have 2 people there because of confined space and things like that. So most days there'll be 2 operators, but there may be 1 operator on the weekend. That's normal. We have 1 guy that goes and does all the tests, and then there's other guys on call. but on the weekends, we'll only normally have one. During the day, you know, we will have, you know, two, normally that are there, because you can't do any maintenance without two guys.
And who would they be working for? Would they be for the utility, if there is one, for the authority, or for the township, or for the developer? Who would they?
Depends on who, they would be working for the owner of the, whoever's owning the treatment plant at that time. So it could literally be, you know, over time, all three. But ultimately, it will be whoever the permittee of it is who they're gonna work for. And they have to be licensed by the state.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Okay, that's it. Any, oh, dates, yes. What's the, yeah, we can go off the record. We'll have to go back on just to clarify the date. 29th or 30th, April?
Nothing sooner.
I didn't check for anything soon. I can certainly.
Yeah, I have that marked, yeah.
What day are you thinking?
I wasn't, I was just not thinking that we would go 5 or 6 weeks without another hearing. You know, I said that, and
Now you're
I'm
looking
gonna
at your
get in
calendar.
trouble because I'm gonna be away at some time. What?
That was the original date, if you have another date.
Yeah. I'm afraid.
23rd works for
No,
me, I
I-
don't know if that works for anybody else.
We can't have it here we can't have it here April 23rd
No, that's election
or the
day.
24th because it's election day. We're setting up the 23rd machines.
What about the 25th?
No, you know what? No. Oh, April 25th you're talking about.
Yes.
Or the 18th?
April 18. April 18 works for me.
Works for me, but I don't know if it's
Here.
here.
Why do we have to?
I got it in the garage, so.
Yeah.
And then next.
That's not the way this works. It usually works the other way.
Well, look, if it's, how are we gonna know if we can have it here? Who do we have?
We have to get in touch with the.
Where's Nick? Can you help?
Yeah, I mean,
They're talking about could the garage be used?
either or, preferably here.
Nick, how many people can the garage hold?
Yeah.
We have to decide, is it not have to advertise
Right,
again?
right.
And send the mailers out again? We have nothing at the, on Thursday, right? Okay.
Oh, there is?
All right, well,
Oh, yeah, there's
fine.
plenty of room in the garage.
The municipal building.
Okay. All right, let's do it. Go ahead. We're gonna get the address. Mark, you have 2 more witnesses?
Yeah,
I would imagine, the way we've been going, I don't think we're gonna get through,
my 2 witnesses are not that long.
but I'm not worried about you necessarily. I'm worried about all the other questions.
I have to check, I'm sorry. My first witness is not
Do you have any witnesses? Can your witnesses be here? All right, let's do the 18th, right? If we only get through Mark's witnesses, we only get through Mark's witnesses. If your witnesses cannot be here, if any of your witnesses can be here, and that goes for everybody with party status. If you have any witnesses that you intend to call, I'm sorry, yes, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, wait a minute, let me check the time. Go ahead.
So the date that the hearing is going to be continued to is April 18th, and that's going to be at the Municipal Building Garage. What is the address to that? 387 Ye Old Highway. And just to notice, the applicant has 2 more witnesses, then there'll be cross-examination of those 2 witnesses. If there's anybody with party status that has a witness that they intend to call, please try to bring them at the next hearing. We'll get through who we can get through. If you can only bring one, only bring one. We're going to try to get through as many people as we can. Anything else? So April 18th at the Municipal Building Garage. We'll see everyone then, okay? 7 o'clock, yes, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you.